Okay. Okay, so yeah, so if people have specific questions for Deb, then we can start there.
I have a question, Deb. You found the red-bellied cooter, and has it now been put onto the Pindi map? Because before the map for the cooter stopped at York Road, because nobody had studied this section. So I just want to make sure it gets logged into Pindi.
Well, Pindi is run by the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program. So that's not something that I have control over. So
Right.
what they do, and I don't know exactly how they work things or how often they update their databases, but they'll take, you know, either known records or of species from either their knowledge or studies or things that people have reported, and it kind of goes into a GIS database. And then when project applicants kind of use the database, they'll run a search based on a specific study area, and the Pindi, or it's really the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory, will give you results based on what the database has in it. So if I remember correctly, I'm going to take a quick look here. When Baker ran the Pindi search, it did cover the full extent of the study, including the area on the other side of Neshaminy Creek. So, and also the red-bellied turtle did come up as one of the Pindi hits. So the Fish and Boat Commission, which is the agency that regulates that species, is aware that it is a potential species of concern in the study area. And what my survey did, what my survey did was basically confirm that, you know, they are there.
So you know, basically your study reported it. It's been reported, so people will find it if they're looking it up. That was
Well, that's right. Ultimately, this data will, as part of the permit process, would get submitted to Fish and Boat Commission, so that they're aware. And that's one of the conclusions in the report, was that, you know, and this would be done as a matter of course, this information, the applicant, being Bucks County, would consult with the Fish and Boat Commission regarding any potential measures they would need to take to protect that species.
Right. Okay, well, I just wanted to get on the Pindi map, but it will eventually. Okay.
While we're on the Pindi, I'm not sure how this goes in terms of people just raising their hand and just talking. I don't want to get off the red-bellied cooters, but I did have a question about Pindi. I know that the study that was undertaken that we're here to discuss did not include purely aquatic life, did not include fish. And I wondered why that was. There's been a lot in the news lately. Just last month, there was an article I read in the Courier Times that said that that Pennsylvania had declared it was no longer safe to eat fish from the Neshaminy Creek Basin because, quote, the area is so saturated with toxic chemicals. And I realize that the chemicals they're talking about are the PFAS, those forever chemicals that have received so much attention. But any further chemicals that would be introduced into the area from paving and so on would be, you know, adding insult to that. So I was just wondering why we were not looking at that. And also Pindi does list fish species that are threatened, that are endangered. So just wondering why we left aquatic species out of this.
So Andrea, I'll touch on two your points. One, I don't want there to be confusion between what the PINDY is and what you may be looking at, which is the list of species for Bucks County as a whole. What PINDY does, which is a database, is a site-specific search for a project, and it's based on known species that are in the database. And that's what the PINDY search looks for. And when applicants apply for their necessary environmental permits that are issued by the DEP or the Corps, the results of the PINDY is what they need to focus on. So the results of their PINDY receipt was solely one species from the Fish and Boat Commission, which was the red-bellied turtle. And secondly, as I mentioned earlier, my scope of work was solely for the terrestrial portions, because at the moment they're not planning to look at the water crossings. Now, in the future, if they are going to do that, there may be additional levels of effort that would be needed to look at any impacts to the Neshaminy Creek itself. So Paul or Chris, or Evan, if you want to expand on that, I'll let you do so.
No, thanks, Deb. I think that's precisely right. The scope of your work was on that, as you say, the terrestrial portion, because we aren't going to be in the water body itself. If and when we were ever to get to that point, naturally, we'd want to look at that. As it goes to the PFAS, there's no question that that is a huge issue. But in terms of the trail itself, I think we've already committed to, we will not be using asphalt to pave the trail. We committed to that early on. So we've taken that off the table. So that should be less of a concern relative to any other chemicals, associated potentially with asphalt.
Okay, I guess I didn't realize that was totally off the table. That's good news.
Yeah, no, we had discussed that early on. I think we committed to using something other than asphalt, probably something along the range of the TSA that we used in the Upper Bucks Rail Trail, and also the inclusion of boardwalks where necessary, and perhaps even not in areas that aren't necessarily necessary, but may enhance and just provide a better outcome. And I know that was touched on in the report as a recommendation, and we're on board with that.
Thanks.
And just as a reminder, in one of our initial meetings, we had covered the TSA as one of the trail service options. So that information should be on the CADC website. But if it's not, and you want information on it again, I can certainly share it with you. And or people want to go up to the Upper Bucks Rail Trail and see what we're talking about in terms of surface treatment, we are certainly amenable to that.
Okay, great.
And this might be a good opportunity just to kind of recap a little bit. I mean, last time we got together, I think was as a group other than the site walk, was in April when we talked about the studies. Obviously, we've got the studies done. You have them in your possession, and that's why we're here today to discuss them. Apologies for missing the site walk. I was dealing with the death of my dad at the time. Hopefully it was useful and informative to all of you. And Deb is here, as well as Seth, to go over the reports and your questions. Right now, our charge by the commissioners is to finish the design of this trail. We are not actively pursuing construction funding money at this time. And any construction trails that we're doing, we are focusing our resources elsewhere. Specifically, the Newtown Rail Trail is the next major effort for the county. We just received design money there, and we're looking for construction funding for that trail project. So right now, as it pertains to this, as Margie McKevitt relayed, what the commissioners have charged us with doing is finishing the design, hopefully with input and having that design inform by your presence on the committee. And that's our charge. So that brings us to today. The environmental reports that you asked us to do are done. And we're here to answer your questions.
So the Fish and Boat Commission are studying the cooter and they're going to get back. Is that it?
In
I
terms of,
don't, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead,
Adam,
Deb. Yeah.
I don't know that where the consultation currently stands, but I know that I believe Baker had initiated just a preliminary correspondence with Fish and Boat Commission as part of the initial project consultation process, but that would proceed accordingly.
And then I noticed all the national agencies were like, you know, doesn't affect. So the Fish and Boat was the only one that was like open-ended. And then in the writings, it said, if there were federal funds included, then the national agencies would have to do a study. Because bald eagles are in the area and that sort of thing. So, you know, we got the turtle study and the amphibian studies, that's good. But there's more to think about as far as animals. And if we get federal funds, then that's what we have to do, that.
Yeah, and I think we've committed to that, Marie. If we pursue construction dollars and they are federally funded, whatever it is that we're required to do, we'll have to do to use those funds.
Right.
And as I've said, you know, as of right now, we are not actively pursuing construction money.
Okay, well, I'm interested in this like segmented approach, which I feel is odd because really the project as described by Paul on the day we were walking around and standing in the parking lot was basically it's the circuit. And I feel like it's not being represented as the circuit. It's being represented as a little nature trail and recreation and that sort of thing. And so I feel that, you know, it's, you know, nice to have a design and have segments and all that. But when the PADEP is looking at chapter 104, section 404, whatever that is, small obstructions of waterways for recreational uses, they're not looking at the circuit going down the whole Neshaminy Creek. Because if they did, they would say no. So I'm just saying, you know, it just seems a little like tiptoeing, kind of sneaky. And we've been over this.
I don't think there's anything sneaky about what we're doing, right?
Okay, well, I just feel like.
And I take offense at that. I think it's a big mischaracterization of what we're doing.
Well, did you
I don't think
have
we're being sneaky at all.
where the
Maria,
trail
yeah.
is built in New Britain? Did that all go through just like the way we're doing it now? And did you have a committee and all that, or did that just go through from before that segment?
Well, if I could speak up, the way trails of any type, whether they're circuit or not, there's several steps. I mean, the initial step is always the feasibility. Well, the first step is, okay, you know, a random line drawn on a map. Then the next step is a feasibility study to determine, okay, yes, if we want to do this trail, what are going to be, you know, some of the, you know, observational challenges, not, you know, detailed analysis. That's kind of the next stage where we get into the design engineering. And then, you know, after you've, and part of, you know, all along those steps, regardless of where you are, you're having to have funding. In other words, there's got to be funding involved for feasibility studies. And then after the feasibility study is done, as this project demonstrates, it can be 5 or 6 years before you actually secure the funding to move to the next stage, which is design and engineering. And then after that, it could be another, 5 years, 10 years, never. The trail might never get built. But that's, I think, again, and that applies to any trail, whether it's because again, the possibility that you would ever have the funding all at one time to develop, more than, literally probably more than a 3 or 5 mile trail is highly unlikely. So the idea that, you would ever have in one fell swoop the funding to develop the entire stretch of the Neshaminy, it just would never happen. And so if it seems, sneaky to you, it's not. It's just a matter of the function of the way the process works in terms of the multiple steps. To your point about the New Britain portion, that section was actually developed by the township, New Britain Township and New Britain Borough. So, and again, they would have had to follow this exact, they may not have done the feasibility study. They may have, done what, before they actually committed to, spending a lot of money on design and engineering, they probably did go out with, either their municipal engineer or, hired an engineer. In fact, I know, Chris is kind of the engineer on contract for Doylestown Bike and Hike, which encompasses many municipalities. But, but that's, like I said, that's all part of the process. And that's why if it seems very segmented and fragmented and kind of taking a lot of time, it's because there are, like say, at least 3 steps: feasibility, design, engineering, and construction for every project. And again, each project is broken up into multiple segments because it just, you may be going after this segment because, you've got the right of way at this point in time. You may be after, going after this because, the township says, oh, yeah, we're going to fund that. In this case, the county said, yep, we're going to fund this. So, but again, as Evan indicated, right now we're, once we finish the design of this, we're at a standstill until we find construction funding. And so again, I just wanted to kind of step in. And again, if I ever, misspoke about, circuit trails, I mean, yes, there are certain funding mechanisms that are more targeted to circuit trails, but you still, there's still that multi-step process regardless of whether you're building, a circuit trail or a non-circuit trail, because a lot of trails around the area are definitely not circuit trails. They're just, they don't meet, quote, the criteria, or they're not, designated as a primary trail route. So.
But this one you said was going to be your main spine for the circuit trail.
When the circuit trail was initially identified, yes. Would I say to you that our focus is shifting over more towards the rail trails, and is being equally, if not more important at this time? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a possibility. Things change over time. Because, even though, yes, our grand vision would be to, yes, have a trail going, all the way from Doylestown down to the Delaware along the Neshaminy Creek, you can imagine the obstacles and challenges involved in acquiring the right of way for that. As you get further south around, Neshaminy High School, you have, the Route 1 corridor to deal with. You've got the trains going through there. So, these are all just yes, it's a grand vision. And is it going to be piecemeal over decades? Yes. And again, just because segments get designed, again, if the construction funding never comes through for a particular segment, it may never get developed. And we don't like that because obviously, yes, you've spent money on design and engineering work. So, if for some reason that segment never gets developed, that's sunk money. And, permits would have to be reviewed because, like you say, conditions change in the field over, 5 years. So yes, we're designing this today, but if we don't build in the next 5 years, things may change again. So the engineering would have to be updated at that point. I mean, a lot of the work would carry over, but, permits expire. So, yeah, so that's where, if it seems very fragmented, it is.
Yeah.
And that's, like I say, just a function of the way trails in general get developed.
I just wanted to add something that the connectivity of these trails is important. It is something that, we're not trying to do a bunch of little isolated trails because that's the way they all start. But the overall mission is someday, that we will have that connectivity all the way. But the only way we can get it done is in small pieces.
Well, this is just a very sensitive area that we're talking about, and this particular area. And so I didn't want to think about connectivity right now because it's a wildlife corridor. There's connectivity for the animals and the nature. But it's very sensitive. And 2 days after we stood in the Valley Road parking lot, Ida came, and I noticed the flood maps, the 100-year floods or whatever, need to be updated because I have pictures of it beyond the areas that show, the 100-year flood. And with more development in the township, county, all over, which I'm watching every day, which is, that's great and all that, but we're just going to have more stormwater, and we lost ash trees. We need the trees. The deer are eating the trees. I mean, it's a real problematic area, and we have a water treatment plant right there, and that's serious. That can't be flooded, and the townships can't be flooded. So we really have a problematic area, this particular stretch. And I suspect down the way for the future, the Neshaminy winds, it's never had a rail trail. It's never had a straight road. There's no bed of anything you can go on. It's going to have to be boardwalk. I think that's really your only option. And it just seems like, I really think the circuit needs to come around and think again, because it's not the Easy Creek like the Newtown rail line or the Perkiomen or the Pennypack, which is the Newtown line. Those were sort of easy. It was a rail trail, and it's a lot easier for right of way and for straightness. And this is just so convoluted, and to me, it's just so problematic to be fighting to get this done and think about connectivity. And as I said before, a nature trail, fine, people should get into nature and all that. Boardwalks, maybe, I don't know. You have to have machinery, and that ruins areas. So anyway, my feelings, but I look at it and I just think it is a grandiose project. And I'm glad you've come away from paving, but the width, the number of trees that have to be cut down, the flooding, the increased flooding, because we're not stopping building. People are building. Route 611's got more building. It's just going to be more and more and more. It's not going to stop. People are not stopping. They should. We all should. But none of us want to sacrifice. None of us want to stop. Climate change, the Glasgow thing was a disaster, not a disaster, but nobody wants to be the one to sacrifice. And I just think this trail's like the opposite direction of all that kind of stuff. So,
Marie, I think we get it. We understand
I'm
what your
glad.
position is. You
Okay.
don't like this, you don't like what we're doing, and you don't like the trail. You've made your position very well known. Our charge is to finish a design. And that's what we're here to do. And we're trying to reach consensus on finishing a design. We may never, ever build this trail. And all the points that you raised, we're all very well aware of. And I think the reports also show that there's ways that this can be done and that it can be done environmentally sensitively. Our charge now is to come up with a design. The hope is to reach consensus. If you understand consensus, it doesn't mean everybody's happy. It's not majority rule, but it's consensus. It means that we've all kind of gotten to a point where we think, okay, if this is what we're going to do, it represents the best foot forward. We were also using this experience as a model for some of the other trail work that we are contemplating to make sure that we do it right and do it the best way that we can. So we're not here really to debate anymore whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, or whether it should be here or it shouldn't be here. We're here to finish the design. And the idea is to take the input that we've gotten from the environmental reports, the way they inform the design process. We've already made adjustments and see where we can make adjustments in the design of just the alignment based on the reports that we've gotten. And there was good recommendations in those reports. And in fact, I believe Deb's report says that it's actually an opportunity to enhance wildlife habitat by building the trail. So that's where we're at. I get it. You don't like it. You don't like the project. You think there's issues with it. That's okay. That's cool. We all have opinions. Yesterday, I got an email for our Bucks 2040 comprehensive plan from a resident in the county who thinks we should have trails along all the water courses in the county to get people out into nature. So we all have different viewpoints and come at this differently. But our charge now with this group and by the commissioners is to finish the design and finish the grant that we were awarded. Whether it ever gets built, who's to say? But I think the idea is to finish the design. And our hope is by having this committee that we could come to consensus. Again, not everybody's going to be happy with everything 100%, but at least we can all kind of come around and say, okay, we've done the best that we can, given the information that we have and the charge that's at hand.
I just want to piggyback on a couple of things that have been said. And I appreciate those points of view. I agree that there's a very interesting conflict, if you will, between when we're talking about connectivity. Connectivity for trails, I understand why that's important, and I like bike trails too. But given the fragmentation of our natural world and how very little connectivity there is for species other than ourselves, I think that Marie has made an excellent point, and I hope that this will be taken into consideration. I'm sure it will when you go into the next phase of the design. I'm also grateful that we talked about flooding, because I don't have my feasibility report up in front of me because it wouldn't download for me. I had made so many comments in the margins electronically that now I just get these big blank things with orange boxes in them. I can't read them, but that was certainly really illustrated very dramatically when, was it 1 or 2 days after our site walk, Ida hit, and we saw what happened. And I went back just for historical purpose. I both looked at reports that came out, a few articles that were written on September 2nd in the Courier Times, and people, gnashing their teeth about flooding and so on. And I also looked back at the Heritage Conservancy, a study that they had done in 2007, and they were talking about all the times that this area has flooded since 1865, and it was quite a regular drumbeat. And of course, we know that a lot has happened in terms of climate since 1865, or even since, the latter decades of the 20th century. So that's something for me I would really, I know people will pay attention to, and I want to say that, this is something that we would like to see them pay big attention to, because there are all kinds of issues with the people who are most impacted by this. And there's a list of them in that 2007 report, the places that regularly get flooded whenever the Neshaminy floods, and both nearby in Warwick and Warrington, and farther afield in Horsham. I mean, people are really going to be affected by what we do here. So I'm glad we're all paying a lot of attention to that.
Thank you, Andrea. And again, just to bring this kind of back around, we have Seth with us and we have Deb with us. So if you have specific questions about their reports, why don't we try to take advantage of the time that they're giving us this morning and get those questions answered?
I have a question for Seth. I just in reading somewhere the description of stand number 3. I don't have it printed out here, but the last statement, we could find that stand number 3. And I just didn't know where he was citing in that last statement. He says something like it's too brushy or something to put a trail, but I didn't know where it was because stand number 3 happens several times along the, let's see. Oh, last statement. He says it's not desirable to put the trail as it's brushy and near the creek. Just at the end of where he describes stand number 3. I just didn't know because there's a bunch of stands number 3. So I don't know which stand.
I had the same question, Marie, and I asked the team this morning before we got on the call.
Oh,
And I
good.
think the area that he's referring to is by the farm field, where you see the number 3 between the 1B and the 2 there. And the trail is not within that stand. It's actually on the edge of the stand in the farm field is where the trail is located. So I think we've done what he's asked.
Okay.
But I've asked the team just to make sure and verify that.
Okay, so he means,
Yeah, sorry for being a little unclear with
that's
that.
okay, that's okay.
That was the intent, was along that agricultural field there. Was the area I was talking about.
So right along in here.
Correct, yep.
Okay,
So
literally right by the
basically
creek,
that's- Yeah,
but an
there's
area up here is okay.
right. The area that's part like in the agricultural field or adjacent to that brush area would seem to be fine.
Okay.
Obviously, it's not going to impact the forest at all.
Yeah.
Just that particular strip where that kind of fisherman's trail kind of goes through there a little bit. That was where I felt it wouldn't be a great spot.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, because that was always our intention, was to kind of be up along the edge of the farm fields and then to kind of cut through that one passage area there. So, okay. Thank you for confirming that.
There is a mistake in the in Deb's thing, and it's an easy mistake, but somewhere in there, she says building between October and April is fine. Everybody's in hibernation, and then later on, it gets reversed by mistake, April to October. But I know what it was meant. I just wanted to point that out, and I can't tell you what page it is. I think it was a mistake.
Well, there is I mean, I'd have to see where in the report you're referring to, but typically turtle hibernation occurs in the water between October and April, roughly. So if
Yeah.
you're doing in-water work, you avoid those time periods. And what you want to do if you're putting nesting fence up, and I
Right.
think that might be you want to do that while the turtles are in hibernation,
Right.
before they come out. So it says, yeah, I think, Paul, you're right there. It says nesting season is typically from mid-June through late July, and hibernation in water bodies is from mid to late October through mid-April.
Right.
So I believe in the recommendations, what we're saying is when you put up, a lot of times the DEP or the Fish and Boat Commission or conservation districts will ask you, see, yeah, right there, Paul, exclusion devices constructed of silt fence to prevent nesting turtles from entering the work zones are installed between October 15th and
Right.
April 15th, because that's when the turtles are busy hibernating, and then the fence will already be in place at the point in time when they come out and start looking for their nesting. So that's why it's written that way. And there's a different seasonal restriction related to tree cutting when you want to avoid tree cutting and clearing of vegetation when other species like birds and bats might be using them. So that's why it says you avoid cutting trees from the middle of April through the end of August. So it's actually not a mistake. It's just two different life stages of different species you're talking about.
Okay, I think there's even another place, but that may be the place where it's actually talking about April and October, but it gets reversed. And I think it's more close to that, the national thing. I'm sorry, I should, what did I have? I'm sorry, I can write this down and send it in to look at later. I don't mean to be taking up all this time, but it was more under the national thing. Where,
Well, you're probably thinking of the bat, the Indiana bat, or the
It could be.
northern long-eared bat, because
It
that's
could be.
that's a federally listed species. And
Yeah.
what typically happens in the construction and permitting phase is if there are any timing restrictions, and we have someone from the conservation district on the call who can confirm, these timing restrictions that applicants are required to follow are written into the notes of a plan. They're,
right,
which is approved by the conservation district. And what that does is make sure that the contractor is aware and adheres to any of the specified restrictions.
Right.
So,
well, anyway,
yeah.
we have it clear in the beginning, so, whatever follows should follow the thing you wrote in the beginning. And then I noticed you suggested to have an expert around when the fences go up. So that's good. Somebody who really knows their stuff. That's good. If I find it,
And to your earlier point, Marie, if, for instance, there was a bald eagle nest in the area, that's a whole nother set of requirements and guidelines as to when and when you can't build or construct, because I've been involved with those types of projects.
and I see eagles fly up and down the creek a lot, especially this year. And lately, there's been an eagle sitting down in the farm field, and I watched him, and he went up and met another one, and then they flew off into the woods, near the housing development there, on the other side from me. But I don't know, it's like, but they've been going up and down the creek a lot, so we do have to watch for that. And actually, there's a beaver, so that's interesting. We've seen beaver damage, and a big giant tree got, because the beavers have to gnaw to wear their teeth down. So, I mean, that's cool. That's good we have a beaver. That means it's healthy. I mean, that's what we want, a healthy creek. So, okay, well, anyway, if I see that thing, I'll write it to you. I'm sorry to, I think it was written backwards. That's okay.
Marie, this is Chris. And Deb's right and Evan's right. We're always required to, well, number one, all these restrictions, these seasonal restrictions will be requirements of any kind of permits that we get. And the county would be required to say, yes, we absolutely understand these requirements, and they'll be incorporated into our construction project. And yeah, it's a matter of a very common thing that we have to develop a construction schedule that outlines all these restrictions for the contractor. And we put specifications and notes in the documents, so they're very aware of when they can do certain activities and when they cannot. So we're used to these kind of restrictions, and they'll be, you can be rest assured that they'll be definitely incorporated into the construction documentation.
That's good. Thank you.
Hey, hey everyone, just to move off of what Chris said, Chris Cook here, Bucks County Conservation District. One, I will say, yeah, I can definitely confirm that upon review of the application submissions, especially the PNDI requirements are required to be explicitly spelled out in the notes for the erosion and sediment pollution control plan. But I will say, secondly, unfortunately, I have to jump off now and get into a second meeting. So I just want to thank everyone for your time.
Thanks,
And just so
Chris.
everyone knows, Chris is the new member of the team for representing the Conservation District. Magna Regalis left for another opportunity. And so Chris is going to be taking over the reins for her. So welcome, Chris.
Yeah, congratulations.
I want to speak as a raw amateur here. I'm listening to the process of how a trail is designed and then ultimately constructed, and that this meeting and this committee we're looking to reach a consensus about the design of this particular piece of this trail. That's a summary. Again, I'm just reviewing in my own head what's going on. I, as somebody passionate about the environment, I know that I don't know a lot. And I have to say that listening to you guys who have experience in the whole process of looking at a potential trail and then reaching the ultimate construction of a trail, I find it fascinating. And I have to say that what we're hearing about the environmental feasibility from the environmental feasibility study is way beyond my experience. But I'm reassured. I have to say that I'm reassured. I don't think that this trail is now where it was almost a year ago. This trail is not a complete 10-foot wide asphalt trail anymore. We're looking at a pervious surface and we're looking at a nature trail pretty much. The problem is the concept of connectivity with the circuit trails ultimately down the road, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. So my question is, okay, thank you so much for the work you've already done. And I understand right now that the funding search really has to do with the Newtown Rail and Trail, not this trail. What we're trying to do here is look at the ultimate design of this small piece of this trail. So my question has to do with the connectivity. And Judy, are you still on? I don't know if
Yes.
Judy.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here.
Yeah, Judy, I guess my question, okay, so is there a way for us here in November of 2021 to look at the trail, the connectivity of the circuit trail down the road and be reassured that we get to talk to the circuit people, that we have a chance at some point in the future to say, wait a minute, guys, we understand that what you're looking for is miles of smiles. I think that's how they put it on their website. I get that. And certainly trails enhance a community. But I want to know that down the road, the circuit people hear the environmental people. How do we make that happen? This design committee is a small piece of a much larger vision. That's been clear to me. So how do we get to that point where, okay, we've looked at this, the committee has been heard, I think, to a large degree. But what happens in the future when maybe it's time to look for funding of this trail? We need to say, whoa, it's so sensitive, it's so fragile. How does that happen, Judy?
Well, from my understanding, I mean, the whole big picture, and Paul, you can speak to this better than I can. The big picture is the connectivity, and that's probably more likely a paved trail. The bike and hike kind of paved trail that we've seen in New Britain and other sections along the Neshaminy. However, in these areas that are pinpointed as so sensitive, And every section of this trail has to go through this process. So if there's areas where that paved trail becomes just inappropriate, we would have, and I would love to see smaller, more nature trail opportunities off of a main trail that is a spine. And I think that that's what the circuit is all about, is kind of getting from point A to B, more long stretches of it. But it doesn't have to be, you know, in raw nature as much as, you know, the whole thing. I'm not speaking very well to this, but it does not have to be, you know, in an area that is extremely sensitive. And that's why these studies are done. If there's something that we pinpoint and we say, you know, it's inappropriate to put here, but we could do something more like what we've come to the conclusion here about this trail, that will happen. But that doesn't mean that this can't connect to something else.
So this could be a little offshoot.
An
kind of
offshoot,
off
of
a
a
larger
spine.
spine. So,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm thinking, you know, 2031, okay. Circuit trail still pushing for a spine. This would, do you think that this area, this highly sensitive, flood prone area would be reconsidered as part of that spine? And how do people like us who are so concerned about this fragile area get a voice at 10 years down the road? I mean, I know there's no guarantee, but
Well, I think we're going through this process with any of these trails. And I don't see that. I mean, there is a voice here, and there is studies that are demanded of all these sections. And if it's inappropriate to do a paved trail, that conclusion, you know, we come to that conclusion and that gets done. That
So
doesn't mean that we can't connect to something that is, you know, a little further away from a sensitive area, so that people can, if they want to, you know, coming up that spine, if you want to call it that, can get off and go to a more, you know, a nature trail area. And we've done that in some areas in Doylestown. We've got some sections where we've got these nice little trails that go off of other areas, and they work very well. And they're not paved, you know, they're different materials depending on the conditions. You know, we've got some boardwalks, we've got some other things, we've got wood chips, we've got gravel, you know, in certain areas. But you know, that every area has to be looked at very specifically, just like we're doing here.
so there's precedent for the circuit trail to modify an original plan because of environmental concerns.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And-
I need to hear that. I need to
Yeah.
hear that. And
And
then
Janine, I think you need to also know, and if you didn't, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council is part of the Circuit Trails program.
Mm.
So, you know, that they are the leading advocate on environmental issues. So they are a part of the process. And every year we meet with them, Paul meets with them, and we discuss the Circuit Trail segments. And we've already made adjustments in segments. So I think the answer to your question is, there's all kinds of ways, and I think Paul just put in the chat, ways in which the general public can get involved in the Circuit Trails process. Also understand that, as I said, Pennsylvania Environmental Council is part of that. So if they're not advocating for the environment, then we have a bigger problem. So they are part of the process. And yes, I think we can amend, and we have in the past amended segments based on a number of different conditions. They could be environmental, they could be feasibility, and you know, and Paul touched on that early on. And I think that's something that, you know, I'd like the group to really kind of understand, is that this notion of feasibility, right? It's one thing to walk the stream bank, as Paul did long before my tenure, and create a feasibility study that says, yes, a trail is feasible. So then the next step is, okay, now you start to look, can you move from feasible to practical, right? And feasible and doable. Okay, sometimes they're become two different things. And look, I'll be the first one to tell you, we have learned through this experience. And certainly the county, as it approaches its trail work, will learn from the experience that we've had with this group and this process. And we've already made adjustments in how we're doing it, just on the Newtown Rail Trail alone. And even if that's just a straight corridor and we have the right of way, there are environmental lessons that we've learned from working with you in this group and this process to make sure that folks understand, because where you started, Janine, by saying that, you know, you're an amateur in the process, I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we need to do a better job at times recognizing that what we take for granted because we do it on a day-to-day basis, the general public may not understand and fully grasp the nuance of the process. We don't get to just draw some lines on a piece of paper and have bulldozers show up and start building a trail. It is a lengthy, regulation-ridden process. Chris will tell you. That's why his hair's gray, okay, to get projects built nowadays. So we understand the sensitivity. We understand that folks get involved, and we may not see eye to eye, right? And we may have disagreements on an opinion, but at the end of the day, our process is highly regulated, okay, to get any trail built. Even on a rail right of way, it's highly regulated to get it built. But we do that, and we're committed to that. And so I think to the long-term question, yes, I think having gone through this, I think we may reevaluate certain segments of the circuit trail along the Neshaminy Creek corridor. And you know, one thing the county doesn't want to do is force projects down people's throats and force them onto municipalities where they're not welcome. And so that's all part of the process. It all goes into the pot, if you will, that makes this process of trails. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not.
You know, one of the things, excuse me, I just want to make sure I say this, Evan. One of the things that I've experienced through this is I want to recognize that Marie lives where this trail was proposed and is a daily observer of environmental impacts, you know, and so I just want to suggest that having a citizen voice like hers is so critical to this process, that somebody who lives there, who sees the eagles and sees the beavers, you know, somebody who lives there really needs to be part of this.
And that's precisely why we formed this committee, and precisely why I recommended that Marie be on the committee.
Okay, and so the Pennsylvania Environmental Council needs people like Marie on, I mean, she needs to be a voice. Marie, you need to be a voice on that, in that group, if they're intimately involved with the circuit design. That would be very important down the road.
And look, as far as what we control and where we're involved, that is our commitment. We are doing that very same. We're going to take this model to the next phase of the Newtown Rail Trail, and make sure that we engage with the citizens and the residents whose properties abut the trail at the very beginning. Not that we ever left them out of the loop before, but we're going to double down and make sure that they're part of the process. Everybody knows what's going on. We did that with the upper Southampton section of the Newtown Rail Trail as well. So as I said, we continue to take those lessons, but I think if you have concerns, then there are ways for you to get involved in the larger trail program.
Okay. Thanks for answering that.
I just want to add something about, you know, just the whole building concept and planning. We've come an awful long way with stormwater management lately, and it's getting updated all the time. And that stormwater management issue for, you know, that's not necessarily the trails, but you were mentioning earlier about development, or Marie was, about development in the area and how it's flooding and things are getting worse. In any design and any land development that's getting done, there's a very stringent stormwater management controls in place that have to be met. A lot of engineering has to go into any plan. And we are trying to get, if a developer comes in, we are trying to get them to incorporate trails where it's appropriate. And they are expected absolutely to do, pretty extensive environmental studies to get that to happen. That's part of the development process anywhere. But it's also important to know that all the residents are notified, in an area before anything gets done, and invited to these public meetings. So that is part of the process, and people are encouraged to get involved. And I think I know that's true in Doylestown Township, but I think it's true pretty universally and with these trails as well. That if it's in an area where, the neighbors are notified and there's public meetings held. I know Chris has held quite a few of them. So I know that's a little off topic, but I just.
No, I think it's a great point, Judy, because in some respects, time is our enemy with these projects. And I think that was one of the lessons certainly that I took away from this interaction was, we took hits and criticism about our public process, right? And that may have happened, 5 years ago. And what we need to do a better job of, and I think have since learned, is that people come and go. And I think, Marie, you might have been one, and I think Linda Rose might have been one who moved in to the community after some of those initial meetings. So you may not have been aware. And so again, when we think about feasibility and moving from feasibility to potential construction, if a number of years have transpired, and elapsed through that time, we have learned that, we need to re-engage with the community to make sure that everybody is aware, and make sure that there is opportunity for input and that people aren't surprised. And I think that was one of the takeaways that we took from this process. But, look, I'll be the first one to tell you, and I've said it before, I could walk naked with a sandwich board down the street and people would still say they didn't know or didn't hear about a meeting. So we face that all the time with certain projects. But again, as it comes to trails, kind of bringing this back around, we've learned and we've taken that to heart that, we understand that transparency, keeping folks in the loop, especially if time has elapsed, that becomes important. And I think this notion of a Citizens Advisory Design Committee is a model that we're looking to incorporate as we go forward with all of our future trail projects. So to your point, Janine, citizens have an opportunity to be part of the process and that the process is better informed.
Yeah, well, this particular trail, I did move in, so I came late into the thing, but all the people that have been here for 30 and 40 years were not informed of the feasibility study and that sort of thing. So I'm glad you've learned from that, and it's good. And I understand people are, they don't pay attention, and planners sit and look at maps and plan all this stuff, but you really have to realize you're impacting nature, you're impacting people. And, I know people, they get impacted in their, not in my backyard and stuff, but that's not who I was. I was like, oh, wow, they're going to do an NGT. That's so cool. And then when I found out it was paved and it was going to have bridges, I said, wait a minute, that's crazy, because I'm environmental, and that, so there has to be, well, and you said you go through these stringent tests and all that, but citizens are becoming more aware of that environmental stuff. And we need to really think about what the plan is and where the plan is, and really get comment. And, because you can look at a map and say, oh, that's perfect. But if you live there or walk there or see it day in and day out and through the storms and the seasons, it doesn't look as good.
Understood. I'm just looking at the time here. We're coming up. We're about 10:10 here. And again, since we have Seth and Deb with us, were there any other questions for either of them?
I just, I'm interested in the tree saplings, and you described somewhat how, this is for Seth, you know, whether it was healthy area or not a healthy area. And I was glad to hear that there are areas that seem healthy where there are a lot of baby trees coming. Do you think that they'll survive, trail or no trail? And I'm just really concerned because what I'm seeing around me is the only native plants are the trees. Everything other than spice bush, everything else is invasive, and silky dogwoods. They seem to be good. So I just wanted to know, like, your feeling, Seth, that, you know, do you think these baby trees are going to survive the deer and everything? Do you feel positive, or do you feel worried because now that the ashes have died, there'll be more vines and things covering the baby trees?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the smaller trees will be browsed by deer over time. Some of the hickories seem like they were in pretty good shape. And that all relates a lot to browse preference by the deer and obviously the population size of the herd. So if there was a sustained hunting pressure, which may not correlate with the nature trail aspect of things, I'm not exactly sure how the hunting is going to be dealt with or not happen at all. If there's an increasing number of deer in the area, those trees are more likely to get browsed unless there was some kind of protection, you know, maybe some identification of some potential young specimens that may release where they could be protected with tree tubes or some kind of fence, small scale fencing enclosure.
That'd be great if we could do that.
I don't know if anybody read my piece in the Herald 2 weeks ago, but I summarized Doylestown Township Environmental Advisory Council Summit that we hosted about deer management. And we're calling for a regional deer management committee to begin meeting in February. And I know that deer are native, and I know the whole thing about that. I'm not an amateur when it comes to deer, I will admit that. But I think it's critical, and because at this moment I have some county people on this call, I think it's so important to realize that culling the herds is the only real way of reducing the deer population. And we have a plan, and it is about sharpshooters, culling the herds where it's possible, and then having the meat processed and given to hunters sharing the harvest for distribution at food pantries. There is an existing plan. The committee will begin meeting in February. And without deer management, I'm afraid that so much is doomed. We're seeing horrible invasive growth in even places like Hart's Woods in Doylestown Township. It's heartbreaking to see what's disappearing and what's taking over, and the deer are the culprits. So I just want to say, county people, can't we at some point have a regional sharpshooter plan, people who are hired to help keep the herds under control? Thank you for hearing me. Read my piece in the Herald 2 weeks ago. It summarizes it.
Hi, Janine. As a wildlife biologist, I just want to say thanks. I'm glad that there are people who understand that deer management is so critical to restoring habitat in some of these areas, because without it, like you said, some of these plans for native plantings aren't going to be successful. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I I have a, sorry.
Your comment was noted.
I had just,
Go ahead, Andrew.
sorry, we're overlapping. I just had a general question, and probably you were going to address this. I feel sure you were, but I want to make sure that I and everybody on the call understands what the next steps in this process are before I get off the call.
Sure, good question. The next steps are we will be taking the results of the environmental report and the recommendations therein and applying them to the design. There's already been changes in the alignment to reflect specimen trees and other conditions. as we get into more detailed design for stormwater management and landscape design, that's where we'll start to address the notion of additional rain gardens, best management practices, and supplemental planning to address, the understory, the natives, and things like that. So I think that will continue to progress. The next thing that you're likely to see, and that we need to do as part of the process, is we need to have our archaeological team go out and do their tests in the field. They will not be out with any heavy equipment. They believe they can do everything with hand digging. But again, that's part of our regulatory and approval process, a necessary step. We purposely pushed them off until we had an opportunity to meet with you to go over the environmental studies. And so that if there's any field work that's going to happen, that'll be the next field work that we need to accomplish in order to advance the design that we need to do. And there again, we'll see what that study yields and whether there's any additional work that we'll need to do. But that is the next field work step that we would need to complete. And then I think as the design progresses and we get to a point where it makes reasonable sense to get with you again, we'll have another meeting of this group and we'll go through kind of those initial preliminary designs to start to show you how all these recommendations and so forth are being incorporated into the design documents.
Great, thank you.
So, are there any other questions today? All right, if not, like I say, we did record this. We'll be posting this to the website, so everyone will have access to it. And again, if you do think of additional follow-up questions for Deb or Seth or anyone really involved with the project, definitely feel free to submit those to us, and we will get back to you with some answers. Otherwise, we will wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Yep, pleasant Thanksgiving, happy and a healthy one, and
Thank
we'll
you.
be in touch.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you. Happy
Thank you all
Thanksgiving.
for your time.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thanks, everyone.
Have a
Bye.
great holiday, everyone.
Yep.
Thanks.
You too. Be
Thanks.
well.
Happy Thanksgiving.